It all began one frosty morning in January 2023 in a small, dusty town in the southwestern United States. Anna Myers, a young woman of 28, led a simple life. A waitress in an old American-style diner, she didn't ask for much from life. A roof over her head, enough to pay her bills, and maybe a little peace. That evening, just as the last customers were leaving the restaurant and she was clearing the tables, a man entered. He wore a long, worn coat, a hat pulled low over his forehead, and walked slowly, as if the weight of years or life weighed on his shoulders. He didn't say much. He sat down alone, ordered a black coffee, and stood there, pensive, staring into space. Anna didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't a man like the others, but he gave no sign of it. No vanity, no arrogance, just silent fatigue. As he left the table, she noticed a wallet that had fallen to the floor, wedged under the seat. She picked it up without hesitation and hurried out into the biting cold of the night to catch it. "Sir, you forgot this!" she shouted as she ran. The man turned around slowly. His face, lit by the fading light of the street lamp, looked familiar. When he lifted his hat, there was no doubt. It was Clint Eastwood, the living legend. But in that moment, he was just a tired old man. He took the wallet with a look full of gravity, then said simply, "Thank you." She smiled gently. He hesitated for a second, as if searching for the right words, then added, "You didn't even look inside, did you?" Anna nodded, a little surprised. "Of course I didn't. Why would I?" He gave her a slight smile, one of those rare smiles marked by sincere, almost mute gratitude. Then he walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The next morning, everything changed. Anna's boss, a dry, rigid man, was waiting for her with a hard expression. "You left your post last night without warning for a customer. Do you think that's acceptable?" Anna tried to explain, to tell what had happened, but he wouldn't listen. "We don't tolerate carelessness here. It's over, Anna. You're fired." Shocked and heartbroken, she packed her belongings into a cardboard box and left the restaurant without another word, tears in her eyes. That day, in her modest little apartment, she sat on the worn sofa with a blank stare. How was she going to pay the rent? What would she do now? It was then that the television, left on in the background, broadcast an unexpected segment. Clint Eastwood appeared on screen. It wasn't for a movie nor for a polemic. He addressed the camera with a rare sincerity. "There are times in life when you think you've lost everything. I buried a close friend that evening. I didn't know if I had the strength to go on." He paused, his eyes staring at the ground. "And then a stranger came out of nowhere. She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for a selfie or attention. She simply helped me because she saw a man, not a star." Anna froze, her breath caught. "That woman reminded me that goodness still exists. She saved me more than she knows." Tears rolled down Anna's cheeks, silent. She would never have believed that this small gesture, this spontaneous act, would have such resonance. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. Anna was still unemployed. She wandered around her small apartment, empty-handed and heavy-headed. Every second reminded her how close she was to the edge. She didn't know how to get out or where to start. Then one morning, everything changed. On television, in a news program, Clint Eastwood's face appeared again. His gaze fixed, his voice low but full of determination. He looked straight into the camera. "I'm looking for her," he said. "I don't know her name, but if she listens to me, I want to say thank you. And if there's a way, any way, to repay her, I will." Anna's phone vibrated. A message from her best friend Lydia popped up. "Anna, you're on the news. This isn't a movie, it's real." The shock was immediate, like a wave washing over her. That little gesture, which she hadn't even really thought about, had triggered something far greater than anything she could have imagined. And with this awareness came fear. Clint Eastwood was looking for her. What would he think of her now? She was now just an unemployed waitress on the verge of eviction. The next day, wrapped in her mother's old coat, she stepped out into the cold morning air. She was walking along, lost in thought, aimless, when a black car pulled up alongside her. A soft, deep, familiar voice broke the silence. "Excuse me." Anna stopped, turned around slowly, and saw him. Clint Eastwood. There he was, right in front of her, his eyes crinkled slightly, recognizing her at once. "It's you," he murmured almost inaudibly. Anna felt her heart race. She opened her mouth, wanted to speak, but no words came out. He gave her a discreet smile, the same one she'd seen that evening. "I've been looking for you." That moment froze time. There was no glory, no pity, just two souls who had crossed paths by chance and who were meeting again in a cold morning, linked by something deeper than words. Anna finally found her voice. "I didn't think you'd remember me." Clint lowered his head slightly. "How could I forget you? You reminded me of something. Something I thought was lost." He hesitated. His eyes darkened, as if what he was about to say weighed heavily. "I'd like to give you back what you have given me." Before she could answer, her phone vibrated again. A message from her landlord. Rent in arrears, eviction notice imminent. She felt panic rising inside her. She quickly put the phone away, trying to hide her concern. But Clint had already understood. "Are you okay?" he asked in a calm voice, his gaze piercing hers. Anna forced a smile. "I'm fine," she lied. He said nothing but inclined his head, watching her intently. Then, in an even softer voice, "You don't have to tell me what's wrong, but I can see it." At these words, Anna felt her dikes break. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "It's nothing." Clint approached slowly. He held out a hand, hesitating for a moment, then gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Anna," he said, as if her first name were a prayer. She broke down. Tears flowed uncontrollably. "I've lost my job. I can't pay my rent. I don't know what to do anymore." She hugged herself like an abandoned child. She hadn't cried like that in years. Clint's face changed. It wasn't pity, it was understanding, a depth of soul she'd never felt before. "You got fired because of what you did for me, right?" Anna nodded, wiping away her tears, ashamed. Then he murmured, "It matters, Anna. It matters more than you know, and I'm not going to let you down." "It's okay. I'll be all right," Anna murmured as she lowered her eyes, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. Clint took a step toward her, his voice becoming deeper, almost hoarse. "Yes, it is. This is serious. You didn't deserve this. What you did, it was human. It was right, and the world needs more people like you. Let me help you." Anna shook her head almost immediately. "I can't accept this." He interrupted her, calmly but firmly. "You didn't ask me anything that night. You didn't hesitate to help me. You had no idea who I was. You just saw a tired man. So now let me do something for you." Before she could reply, Clint slowly pulled a piece of paper from the inside pocket of his coat. Unfolding it carefully, he held it out to her, his gaze still fixed in hers. "Take it," he said softly. Anna, hesitant, took the sheet between her fingers. She unfolded it and her heart stopped for a moment. It was a check, an amount she'd never seen before in her life. Her hands trembled. "I can't accept this. It's too," she stammered. Clint smiled a tiny, almost melancholy smile. "It's not about the money, Anna. It's a way of saying thank you. What you gave me that night, I hadn't felt it in a very long time. Hope." Anna, overwhelmed, didn't know what to say. She felt torn between gratitude and embarrassment. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Clint replied softly. "But promise me one thing." She looked up at him. "What's that?" He stared at her, intensely. "Never let this world extinguish your goodness. It's rare and precious. Keep it alive." For the first time in days, Anna felt a spark of hope. A gentle warmth rushed through her chest. But Clint looked down for a moment, his face a darker shadow. "There's something else I didn't tell you that night," he said in a low voice. Anna frowned, concerned. "What's that?" He took a deep breath. His voice was almost a whisper. "I just come back from the hospital. My sister is battling cancer. That night, I was lost. I didn't even know if she was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to make it." Anna's eyes filled with tears at the sight of the pain in this man's gaze, once invincible on screen, and now so human. She instinctively placed her hand on his arm. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice in knots. Clint nodded slowly, a sad smile on his lips. That night, you didn't just give me back my wallet. You reminded me that there was still light, even in the darkness. And now, I'd like to be that light for you. Anna's tears flowed freely. It wasn't charity or pity, it was something deeper, an unexpected bond between two lost souls. But life is never simple. Just as he was about to say something else, Clint's phone vibrated. He pulled out the device, read the message, and his face closed. I've got to go, he said reluctantly. But this isn't the end, Anna. I promise. Before she could reply, he squeezed her shoulder gently, then turned on his heels. Anna stood there, frozen to the sidewalk, the check still in her trembling hands, her heart filled with gratitude, confusion, and raw emotion. She didn't know what the future held, but deep down, she sensed that this was only the beginning of a story far greater than anything they could have imagined. She watched Clint disappear into the crowd. It wasn't the money she was clutching. It was this strange, unlikely, but undeniably real bond between her and this man whose life seemed light years away from her own. Anna wiped away her tears and inhaled deeply. It's not real, she murmured. But it was real. That night, Anna returned home. The check still in her hand, Anna slowly placed the check on her kitchen counter. She stared at it, as if simply looking away would make it disappear. This piece of paper represented much more than a sum of money. It was a lifeline, a hand held out in the darkness. Yet part of her still hesitated. Too many emotions. Too fast. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Lydia. You need to see this. Right away. Anna clicked on the link. A video opened. Clint Eastwood was standing outside a hospital, surrounded by journalists. He spoke in that same deep voice, laden with fatigue, but also with quiet strength. My sister, she's my rock. She's always been the strongest of us all. And today, as she fights this disease, I've realized how vital it is to have people around you who make you want to keep going. He paused, lowering his eyes. There's one person who reminded me of that recently, a person who, without knowing it, brought me back to life. I hope she knows how much she meant. Anna felt her heart clench. On the video, a frail, pale-skinned woman with a tired but gentle face was being helped into the hospital. She was Clint's sister. Despite the illness visible on her body, she exuded an almost luminous warmth. Tears rolled down Anna's cheeks. Clint wasn't playing a role. He was carrying a burden she'd never imagined. And yet, in the midst of it all, he'd taken the time to seek her out, to help her. The next morning, Anna knew what she had to do. She carefully folded the check, slipped it into her bag, and set off for the hospital. Once there, she hesitated in the lobby. What would she say? Would they let her in? She was nothing, just a stranger. A nurse passed by and smiled at her. You're Anna, aren't you? Anna, surprised, shyly nodded. He mentioned you. Come. The nurse accompanied her down the silent, winding corridors. They stopped in front of a closed door. Through the small window, Anna saw Clint sitting by the bed, holding his sister's hand, talking to her in a low voice. His back seemed more hunched than ever, bent with worry. The nurse gently opened the door. Clint looked up in surprise. His features softened immediately. Anna? He said, rising to his feet. I hope I'm not disturbing, she murmured nervously. Clint's sister straightened slightly and smiled warmly. Is that her? She asked in a soft voice. Clint nodded, his eyes still on Anna. Yes, it's her. Anna approached slowly, her throat tight. Hello, I'm Anna. The sister smiled despite the fatigue in her eyes. I've heard so much about you. Thank you for looking after my brother. He needs people like you. Anna turned to Clint. Her gaze, usually so impassive, betrayed a rare vulnerability. I haven't done anything extraordinary, she said. Clint shook his head. You've done a lot more than you realize. I don't think you realize how much you've changed my life, Anna said, her voice trembling, her eyes misty with tears. Clint looked at her in silence, his face marked by emotion. And you've changed mine, he replied simply. He hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right words, weighing every syllable, every breath. I don't want this to be the last time we see each other. Anna inhaled softly, her throat tight. "It doesn't have to be," she murmured. For a few seconds, they stood there face to face, in a silence charged with all that had not been said. Then, as if the universe had decided to remind them that nothing was ever simple, Clint's phone vibrated in his coat pocket. He glanced at the screen, his face tightened. "It's the doctor," he said mid-voice, then nodded, stepped back a pace. "Go on," he said firmly, though the pain was visible in his eyes. Anna turned back, her steps slow, her heart heavy. But as she walked away, Clint turned one last time. Their eyes met across the corridor. "This isn't goodbye," he said in a confident, almost solemn tone. Anna stopped dead in her tracks. She stood there transfixed, her heart beating between hope and uncertainty. Then the door closed behind him gently, like a suspension point in the middle of an unfinished sentence.